This is Radio Health Journal. I'm Reed Pence. This week, the COVID baby bust.
In many ways, we may want to think of the pandemic as having hit the pause button on people's fertility. And the question is, will they take their finger off that button once the world returns to a little more of normal?
How birth rates affect schools, employers, and the economy years down the road. The Radio Health Journal returns.
I'm Nancy Benson, host of Radio Health Journal. If you enjoy listening to Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show, Viewpoints, which covers a wide array of topics from education to history to the environment. Here's a preview of what they're covering this week on Viewpoints.
I think in the long run, these people are going to disappear and Dogecoin will fall about 99% lower than it is today. It's just a question of when that's going to happen.
Inside the world of cryptocurrency. Then,
I think there's still kind of a taboo around talking about money, and it's shifting, but we aren't quite there yet.
The touchy conversation of money management. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Viewpoints on your favorite radio station and subscribe and listen to shows anytime on Apple Podcasts and Google Play.
36-year-old British journalist and author Nell Frizzell has been wrestling with the same decision a lot of couples have been weighing over the last 14 months, whether or not to have a child.
To be confronted with the uncertainty of life, which is presumably what everyone has gone through in the last year, it is very hard to then take the step to bring a new person into that very uncertain future. And, the idea of going into appointments in a hospital, or the idea of having to use sort of medical services seems like something that I'd rather not be doing at the moment.
That struggle is the subject of Frizzell's new book, The Panic Years: Dates, Doubts, and the Mother of All Decisions.
Me and my partner, although we have a son, I would love to have another baby, but we have decided that now we're not going to, possibly forever, but certainly not for at least another year, because it just feels like a very uncertain and scary time to be getting pregnant. I do think that over the last 12 months, there has been a real reckoning with things like the climate crisis and social injustice and financial hardship. And I think once you have confronted those issues head on, it may change the way you feel about having a baby forever.
Whether it has a long-term effect for a lot of people is anyone's guess. But in the short run, COVID-19 has had a profound effect on birth rates in the United States. Nationwide figures for babies conceived after the start of the pandemic show a dramatic COVID baby bust. December births were down by 8% compared to the year before.
The year-over-year change in December was quite dramatic. And for the year overall, births were down between 3 and 4%, which is, considering the pandemic didn't start until partway through the year, that's quite dramatic. And if you go back to look at previous one-year changes, you'd have to go back to the end of the baby boom to see a drop in fertility that large.
Dr. Philip Cohen, professor of sociology at the University of Maryland, says a drop in the birth rate is no surprise. But experts say the number of births in the U.S. may plummet as a result of the pandemic by 300,000 in just 1 year.
We would expect the birth rate to decline during really any kind of crisis, and economic crisis in particular, because it affects people's planning and how they're feeling secure about the future and so on. However, what was really unique about the pandemic was how rapidly the economic crisis hit and the way it was connected with the health crisis. They're concerned about their job, or they lost their job, or their housing situation is up in the air, or they have health problems, or a family member's health problems, the kids are home. All the things that have been going on would lead a lot of people to decide this is not the right year. So we definitely would expect to see a drop in births after a crisis like this, but this was just very sharp.
But the pandemic drop is even more than it appears. It's on top of a decline that we've already been experiencing since the crash of 2008, making for a total decline in the birth rate of 19% since then. U.S. Census figures released a few weeks ago confirm it. Between 2010 and 2020, America's population increased by the slowest rate since the Great Depression.
So if you think of that decline in birth rates as a ski slope going downward, you now have this COVID-19 pandemic that's like an avalanche coming down that slope, pushing birth rates faster and farther down.
Dr. Laura Lindberg is principal research scientist at the Guttmacher Institute.
What we know about the 2008 recession is that fertility declined because of the economic downturn. And in fact, there's some strong research showing that in geographic settings where unemployment rates were higher, the birth rate fell more. So a strong link between economic and fertility rates. But when we think about the pandemic, there's so much going on here. We have an economic recession, people losing their jobs, losing health insurance. We have the social disruption of the pandemic, whether that's the need for social distancing, children's schools being closed and homeschooling, jobs shifting from commuting into work to staying at home, all the social change that's happened around the pandemic. And then, of course, it's a health crisis where people have either been fearful of getting sick or have gotten sick, and of course, the mortality associated with that. Enormous numbers of Americans have lost someone in their family due to this pandemic. And the compounding impact of that loss on family life really needs to be considered.
Surveys of women during the pandemic confirm that they've had second thoughts about bringing a child into an unsure world. For example, the Guttmacher Institute survey a year ago, early in the pandemic.
We interviewed a national sample of women and asked them, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, have you changed your plans to have children, either the number or the timing? And about a third of women said that because of the pandemic, they either wanted to have fewer children or they wanted to delay having children. This interest in delaying or reducing fertility was larger among women who already faced challenges in the U.S. So we found that Black and Hispanic women were more likely than white women to report shifting fertility preferences because of the pandemic. Lower income women were more likely than higher income women to report that they wanted to delay or reduce their fertility.
Deciding against having a baby is one thing, but Cohen believes the pandemic has also affected the birth rate among people who aren't planning their fertility.
In the United States, more than in most other rich countries anyway, we have a fairly high proportion of births that are less than consciously planned, that are accidental or semi-accidental or, not completely planned. And I think those are probably also down this last year because people are meeting less and socializing less and spending less time together with people that they're not living with. So I would expect, it's too early to tell in the research, but I would expect that both the planned and unplanned births would be contributing to this big decline we've seen.
That flies in the face of good old conventional wisdom that unplanned births might increase in a time when couples are locked together in close quarters, that more togetherness means more babies.
You might call that conventional wisdom. It's probably more, I would call, common mythology. I do think, if you had a short-term occasion where everybody was stuck home for a week and it wasn't a disaster, then I think you might actually see a little spike in births 9 months later. But we did not have that situation. So we had people who were stuck home involuntarily in a condition of uncertainty with reduced privacy because their family members were home. We had a lot of young adults who were unexpectedly living with their parents. So even if there were some more cuddle time and some more either accidental or planned exuberant pregnancies, I think that would just be dwarfed by the downside.
Cohen says we haven't hit the bottom of the baby bust yet. The pandemic was still going full force last August when today's newborns were conceived. But some experts say eventually we might see a little bit of a baby bump as some couples try to make up for lost time.
Then you have to start looking at the age of the people who are affected. So like after the big recession in 2009, We saw birth rates for older women, so women in their late 30s or early 40s. Their birth rates are not as affected because they're more driven by the clock, so to speak, and don't want to put things off for a year or so. Younger people, much more likely to hold off for a year or two and then have some kind of rebound. I think we never really saw that rebound after what we used to call the Great Recession in 2009 in birth rates. So birth rates fell and they never really came back. And so I think the real question is going to be what happens with the economy. If it comes roaring back, then I would expect to see a substantial rebound.
In many ways, we may want to think of the pandemic as having hit the pause button on people's fertility. And the question is, will they take their finger off that button once the world returns to a little more of normal?
The effects of the baby bust could be far-reaching in education and the job market over the next few years, the next generation, and even beyond. Cohen says in 5 years we'll see fewer kindergartners and on up the grades as they go through school. When they reach their late teens and early 20s, there will be fewer of them to compete for jobs.
If it's a sudden drop and it bounces back, then you have, an interesting experience for a cohort of people that are part of a small group. Things can go well for them. They may find suddenly they're in smaller classes because the capacity is built up before they get there. They may find that they're in a good position in the job market in 20 years or 18 years when they get out of school and all of a sudden there's a drop in the number of people applying for jobs. If it's a more prolonged decline, and birth rates continue to go down or stay very low, then eventually it does pose some challenges as it becomes sort of part of the structure of our population, that we're growing slowly and eventually our population would start to decline.
That's the path we're on now. The current fertility rate is at 1.6, and that's below replacement rate. That's when an ongoing baby bust will pose problems for the labor market and the tax base. But both Lindbergh and Cohen believe the pandemic has forced lawmakers to confront the need for more family-friendly policies that might counteract a population decline.
So much of what has gone on during this pandemic has highlighted the gaps in the social safety net in the U.S. We, as a nation, have forced mothers to provide the safety net that no one else does. And I think American mothers are tired and frustrated. And we need to think more about how to put in place policies that make it easier to raise a family in the U.S. And until we do that, there's going to be challenges to fertility.
I think we are likely to see more pressure for policies that help with what you could put in the category of work-family policy, that may be parental leave, maybe child tax credits, maybe more support for subsidies for childcare. We don't have a lot of experience with it in this country, but you did see in the stimulus package that just went through money to families with children, and I think we're going to see pressure to continue those kind of policies. And I think we'll have a very rigorous debate about, are we trying to be pro-natal and encourage births? Are we trying to encourage mothers to stay home with their children? Are we trying to encourage them to go out and get jobs when they have children? And so that will all remain to be seen.
However, Cohen says even generous pro-family policies may not have much of an effect on birth rates long term. Most people decide whether or not to have children based on other factors, like the confidence they have in their own economic prospects. As Cohen says, it's very hard to turn that ship around. You can find out more about all of our guests on our website, radiohealthjournal.org. I'm Reed Pence.
A new peer-reviewed study shows that California prunes can completely stop bone loss that's common after a traumatic injury. The study adds to a growing body of evidence that prunes are exceptionally beneficial for bone health, stopping bone from degrading and actually helping to build new bone, according to registered dietitian Leslie Bonsi.
California prunes are particularly rich in bone-building minerals. They provide boron, manganese, and also vitamin K, another nutrient that's fundamental for bone formation. Study after study are showing an exciting prune effect on bones, and preliminary results from the largest study yet on prunes show that they may protect bone by reducing inflammatory markers in study participants.
Evidence from studies on postmenopausal women, on men, and on fracture healing all show how California prunes are a convenient, economical, whole fruit option to benefit bone health. Find out more at californiaprunes.org.
Cardiovascular or CV disease is the #1 killer of adults in the U.S., and millions of people trying to reduce their risk of a heart attack or stroke may unknowingly be taking medications that are not proven nor FDA approved to reduce cardiovascular risk. Let's hear from cardiologist Dr. John Osborne.
Many people are unaware that after a failed outcome study, the FDA withdrew the approval of fenofibrate when added to statins as the risk outweighed the benefits to heart health. It's important to remember that statins, along with diet and exercise, can lower cardiovascular risk by about 25 to 35%, but persistent cardiovascular risk, which can lead to a life-threatening event, may remain. I would tell anyone still being prescribed fenofibrate, such as Tricor, Entera, and Trilipix, with a statin, to talk to their doctor about FDA-approved therapies for cardiovascular risk reduction.
To learn more and get clear on the facts, visit itscleartomenow.com. Again, that's itscleartomenow.com.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Radio Health Journal is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more. And check Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and information about our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.
Coming up next week on Radio Health Journal.
A number of the sources I've interviewed say those inspections are essentially staged and don't really reflect the quality, the true quality of the plants overseas.
90% of the drugs we take are generics, and the vast majority come from overseas. How can the FDA make sure they're safe?
Then, researchers explore the link between COVID and kidney function.
The early reports clearly indicate that the kidney is a major target of the COVID-19 virus.
All that and more on Radio Health Journal.